The More of Us podcast features real, uncut conversations about life, pastoral ministry, and walking with Jesus. All guests are pastors in the Charis Fellowship, bound by our common commitment to biblical truth, relationship, and mission. We trust as you hear more of us, you'll see Christ among us.
Today we have Josh Placeway on the More of Us podcast. Josh has served as the lead pastor of Manheim Grace since June 2021. He's passionate about the local church and believes the church was created by God to accomplish his mission for reaching the world with the gospel of Jesus. He enjoys spending time with his family, sports, and a good conversation over a cup of coffee. Josh is married to Jennifer and has 3 children, Abby, Ben, and Jacob. And his life verse is trust in the Lord with all of your heart, lean not to your own understanding, and all of your ways acknowledge him, and he will lead your paths straight. Taken from Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6. Josh, welcome to the program.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you, Josh. I had reached out to you one time before, and then when I saw you at our national conference, I was like, I want to get you on the podcast. Josh and I sat at the same table for communion. There was a communion at the end, and so I followed up with him. And Trent, it's been a minute since you and I were.
It has been a minute. We were just saying that the summer has gotten away from us, but we've got students coming back on campus next week. And I believe, Tim, you've got a daughter coming, right?
Yeah, my oldest daughter. First one we're sending to college. She's coming to my alma mater, so that's exciting.
So, Josh, you and I may have to offer some counseling here as we do this podcast.
Yeah, I might tear up. My wife and I go back and forth between let's rip off the Band-Aid and kick her out of the house, and then like we don't want her to go, and I'm like doing dishes and kind of crying.
Yes.
There it is.
Well, as you learn, I'll have to reach out to you to get your wisdom as my kids get older.
I'm always available. Trent, you may not know this, but Josh actually attended Leesburg Grace for a short season.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so we got to know him and his wife Jennifer, and then there was this young marrieds group that we had at our church, and we were just reflecting on it a couple nights ago. And everybody who was part of that young marrieds has left, and so I have vowed to never have a young marrieds groups at our church again because I want people to stick around.
Yeah, we still look back on that season with fondness. That was our first year of marriage, and so it was we still look back with great fondness of that time.
Well, hey, Josh, it's this time of year. We're getting into the football season, so I have to ask you, who's your college team?
Well, having grown up around South Central Pennsylvania, I'm a Penn State fan for sure, through and through.
Yeah, Trent and I are Buckeye fans.
By the way,
Ups and downs.
Josh and Tim, have you seen what's happening on the Columbus campus at Ohio State University recently?
I haven't.
Revival's taking place.
Oh, really?
People are getting saved and coming to Jesus. Have you seen that, Josh?
I haven't seen much of that, no.
I mean, players, there's a catalyst, a certain players leading people to Jesus, and now they've got these Nike branded shirts that say Ohio State logo on the back, and on the front it says Jesus won.
Wow.
So I had to get my son one the other day, but that's my alma mater, man.
That's awesome. That's very encouraging.
So I need to tease all my Michigan friends now that they need to know Jesus.
Yeah, I've got a lot of family that lives in Ohio. My wife's from Northeast Ohio, so I get we like to razz each other quite a bit about the Penn State Ohio State rivalry, or if you can even call it that. I don't know.
Josh, last year I got to tell you, I was actually at the Penn State Ohio State game, and I must tell you, it was in the shoe, but the Penn State fans were incredible. They were polite. They were, of course, rooting for their team, but none of them got ugly because I happened to be sitting in the Penn State section by mistake.
Did you?
Yeah.
Hey, well, it's fall football, but there's other things that go on in the fall. And I am curious with you, Josh, what would be a couple words that would describe life this time of year for you? Maybe the 3 best.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I think family for sure, because in school, my wife Jennifer is a teacher by trade, and she took about 7 years off from teaching to stay home with our kids as they grew older, and this is the first year where all three of our kids will be in full-time school. So I think about family and school and just what that rhythm looks like. And the last word would be rhythm. I'm a person that lives by rhythms, and the summertime lack of rhythm, has, different times thrown me off. So I'm excited to get back into a regular routine, and the rhythm of the fall. I'm excited to get back to that.
I know that feeling for sure.
I'm not sure if this ever happens to you, Josh, but I need to ask, if you had a whole day to yourself with no responsibilities, what would you do?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I had just mentioned that all three of our kids will be in full-time school. Well, up to this point, the last handful of years, I've always had something with kids on even on my days off. So this would be the first year I'll actually have a day off without any kids around. So it'll be interesting. I'd say rest, some type of exercise, getting outside, um, going on a hike or a walk, or enjoying some golf at times, and then just a good cup of coffee and a good book would be my ideal day.
Those sound like great activities. What are things you like to do with your family when you're together with them? You mentioned 3 kids, ages, and then your wife, Jennifer.
Sure, yeah. So our oldest Abby is 10. She's in fifth grade, or she'll be in fifth grade here soon. My middle is Ben. He's 7 in second grade, and Jacob is 5. He's just starting kindergarten, so he's our last one to go off to full-time school, and we're still processing that as parents. But we enjoy just spending quality time together, going on hikes and walks, going on bike rides around our neighborhood, playing games, campfires in the backyard. Although don't mistake that for us being a camping family. We are not a camping family. Campfires in the backyard does not equal that we like to sleep on the ground. We enjoy our beds, but we enjoy laughing and just having a good time together for sure.
The Hilton camper.
Yeah.
I get it.
I did camp this summer for the first time in 2 years. I slept on the ground. I'm using the word sleep loosely. I
Yeah.
was rolling back and forth, and it hurt so badly. The next night I was on a hammock, and I got so cold, so I was like, "I'm done with this."
Maybe that's why we're not a camping family, is that we just all enjoy sleep too much.
It's a good thing.
Well, Tim, I had to sleep in a car this summer. That was interesting.
You get kicked out of the house? Do we need to talk about this?
No, I didn't get kicked out of the house, but my flight was delayed, so I slept in the rental car in the parking lot.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't advise it.
I probably didn't sleep that well.
Didn't sleep that well. No. Hey, Josh, how long have you guys been married?
Yeah, Jennifer and I have been, let's see, it was 14 years in June.
14 years in June.
Yep.
How long did you guys date?
We dated for about a year and a half. We met at Grace, but neither of us, we didn't really date when we were students at Grace. I was still in the seminary, but she was finishing up her student teaching. We dated more toward the end of our time there at Grace. So probably about a year and a half we dated, and then we were able to get married after I finished school. So then we hung around in Indiana and spent some time with Tim at Leesburg for sure.
Yes.
Josh, in marriage, we learn very quickly that our spouses um, like things that we may not like, and over a process of time, we learn to complement each other. Um, Talk to us about you and Jennifer. How do you guys complement each other?
Sure, yeah. She's I would say, really, truly, honestly, and I say this very honest, he's just the perfect partner for me in life and ministry. I don't know if you've seen or heard about the different birth order, books or stereotypes, and we tend to fit into those pretty, pretty tightly. She's a firstborn daughter, oldest of 4 in her family. I'm the youngest son, youngest of 3. I tend to lean more on the extroverted side. She tends to be more introverted. I'm big picture thinker. She's more into the details of life, and I often will have a desire to be around other people, and she, after a full day of ministry, will come home and just say, "I just need to be alone." So that's what we've learned about each other, and that's one of the ways we complement one another, and our giftings are fit together, and that's how God has made us and why He brought us together.
We planned that question very strategically because Trent and I could say, what are the tension points in your marriage? And it makes it sound like it's a bad thing. We're saying, how do you compliment each other? It's the same stuff, right?
What do you fight over? Yeah.
But we really should see it as a compliment, as a iron sharpening iron.
Sure, last spring she was able to go get away for a few days just by herself, and so my appreciation for her and what she does for our family grew exponentially over those couple of days. So I found myself asking her, "How do you remember all that stuff in your head? Like it was like so stressful. Like how do I remember all the things that I have to remember as a mom? How do you do that?" So kudos to all the moms out there for sure.
Tim, is your wife an extrovert or introvert?
Our whole family's introverted.
Whole family's introverted.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert, Tim. My wife is an extrovert.
Yeah.
And Josh, I love it because you know what? If we go to parties, we go out, we get to go, and I don't have to say a word. I can just eat, and I just wind my wife up like a top, and she goes and talks to everybody, and I
does
just
it all.
eat. It's awesome.
I will look for the one person at the party, and I will talk with the one. I like the one-on-one conversation, not the big.
I get that.
Sure.
Yeah,
While you're eating.
that's right.
Yeah.
There's got to be food.
That's right.
Josh, you are nearly middle-aged, and I'm middle-aged, so I can say you're nearly middle-aged. I'm curious how surprises that you've encountered as a nearly middle-aged man.
Sure, yeah, as I kind of was processing through that question and thinking that through, I don't know if I have too many surprises, but just the fact that life just, you know, if I thought it went by fast before, it's continuing to just fly by, and just I just need to take advantage of every moment that I have with family and in ministry and with just friends and people around me, because it's just going by so fast.
Yeah, a couple blinks, that kindergartner of yours,
Oh my goodness.
Jacob's gonna be a high school graduate. I'm tearing up, Trent. Sorry, guys.
We
Wait
get
a
it,
minute,
we get
Josh.
it.
I got to go get the Kleenexes.
Yep, I understand. I'm a crier myself, so I have empathy for you, Tim.
Appreciate it.
Hey, Josh, you know, we all have this with our kids in ministry and church. And, you know, describe a scene behind the scenes in your home, maybe something your kids see about you that maybe others don't.
You sure?
And please feel free. You don't have to embarrass yourself.
Oh,
Or maybe you do.
okay. I'm okay. I'm okay putting myself out there a little bit. So yeah. So well, Jennifer and I would say early on, made an agreement, in our marriage that she would handle the cooking and I would handle the cleaning up. So one of the things that my kids see is, I'm hopeful that they see me serving, our family and my wife, particularly when it comes to something practical like cleaning up the dishes after a meal, and being the one to stand behind the counter and take care of the dinner cleanup. So most nights you'll see me behind the counter doing dishes, and usually with a podcast in my ear, or a book on tape in my ear. And but when it comes to the kids, you know, I really place a high value on getting to know my kids, investing in them. I'm not an expert at that, but I try to be really intentional about spending one-on-one time with each kid. Um, I love having talks with them at night. My daughter is a night owl, so she will. So we oftentimes will have late night talks about life and faith, and school. And I just really love being a girl dad. My boys are still the age where they just want to 24 hours a day wrestle with dad. So if you are at our house, it's oftentimes, as my 5-year-old would say, wrestle time. And so we'll go into a side room and the boys will climb all over me, and that's it's important to them.
It's WWE.
Yes, we did a thing for Father's Day, I think last year or the year before here in our church, where we asked kids what they love about their dad, and both my boys said he wrestles with us. So that's kind of a fun thing that I like to do with my boys.
You know, Josh, I used to do that a lot, but now my son is 6'4" and 285, and he says, "Hey, Dad, you want to wrestle?" I'm like, "No,
Nope,
no."
thanks. Yeah,
Because you want to
my
walk in.
son's only 7, and I I've said often, I've noticed him getting stronger over these last 3 or 4 years, where it's a little different wrestling with him, and I'm sure that'll continue as he gets older and
It's
stronger.
called survival.
Yes.
Yeah, coming out with no broken bones.
So I love wrestling with my boys, just playing with them, being, having fun with them. I love to help my family laugh, and we enjoy playing games together, and I just really enjoy just spending time being with my family for sure.
That's great. And the logic of these questions, by the way, not everybody, as they're listening to a podcast, wants to hear everybody's personal backstories and those kind of things. But we're husbands and fathers before we're pastors. So we want to know about you as a human being
Amen.
before we dive into your ministry stories. But
Amen.
one of the things that's interesting about your ministry story as we transition into that part of the conversation is that your dad was a pastor and his dad was a pastor. And so you're a third generation pastor. And I'd love to hear how your grandfather and your father prepared you for your pursuit of ministry.
Yeah, I'm very open and quick to share that with people, just because I'm extremely honored and proud of that legacy. Um, in fact, my grandfather pastored here in Manheim, in the late '70s, early '80s. So I
Same
have that
church or
legacy.
just same town?
Same church. Yep.
Wow.
So I have that legacy. There still are a few people here at our church that were here during my grandfather's ministry. So it's fun to be able to talk about those days, so that's just one piece to that puzzle. But how do you really quantify it? I just feel so proud of the legacy that has gone before you. And my grandfather, he met with me, mentored me in high school. He baptized me when I was in elementary school. My dad, I would say not just my dad, but really my mom and my dad played a big role in just modeling for me what it means to live a Jesus-centered life of service. Always thinking about other people, always serving, always caring for the needs of others and people around them, always having their home open to people, whether it's a late night counseling session in our home, or a meal on Sunday after church, or a meeting with youth staff or whatever it was. They just always were always thinking about other people. But particularly my dad, one of the things he showed me, and still sticks with me, is just his faithfulness and longevity in ministry and what that looks like and requires. Um, it's a big part of his story, and it's a big part of mine as well. Just this heart desire to dig in and stay through all the seasons. And he served in two local churches mainly, but mainly one for around over 25 years. So I've learned I learned from my dad about just what it means to be faithful, and what's required to have longevity in ministry in a place. So that's one of the things. Something else I think too is that I've always felt like I had a leg up on other men, other pastors in full-time ministry, because I lived it even before I was in full-time ministry. And I know my parents protected me from a lot of that as a kid, a lot of the hard moments, but even even still, I was able to learn what it means to be a serving family, and um, the ups and downs of ministry that I experience now. I think truly just do not catch me quite as off guard as maybe they would, just because of my experience as a pastor's kid, and particularly a third generation pastor. And I've got memories of my dad taking me, on hospital calls with him, and visiting people, shut-ins in their home, and so those are moments that I think really built in me a heart for full-time ministry, for pastoring, and really a heart for service and people. So I feel just extremely blessed and grateful for my family legacy that I have.
It's great. I wonder if Ben or Jacob will end up being a fourth generation pastor. They're watching, that's for sure.
Yes, I've prayed for that over as they've grown older, but also prayed just that the Lord would just draw him to himself, and that whatever their future holds, that's what I'd love to support that. I don't want them to have that pressure, although I'm sure that they will feel that at times.
Hmm. Hey, Josh, we've got some listeners that are trying to figure out their calling. Has God called me to pastoral ministry, missionary, whatever it is? What are maybe some early experiences you had that helped confirm and solidify your desire and calling to pastor?
Yeah, sure. I touched on it a little bit earlier um, in the previous question, but just growing up in a serving family really allowed me to experience ministry early on. I think that's one thing. Another thing would be growing up in a church that allowed me to serve and allowed me to use my giftings, and that was huge for me as a young adult, as a adolescent growing up, and just being able to utilize my giftings and to explore those things was a huge thing for me. And the Lord planted seeds really for full-time ministry in my heart, uh, even as a young child, um, realizing that He was preparing me each step of the way for a full-time ministry. And I didn't always wasn't always I was a little reluctant at times earlier in my adolescent days for full-time ministry, but the Lord really confirmed in my heart His calling on my life on a ministry training trip for high schoolers called Operation Barnabas. Um, it was formerly CE National, now Momentum Ministry Partners. I was on that trip as a 16-year-old, and I can remember it like it was yesterday, just feeling like the Lord really spoke to me on that trip, and said, not only do, do I want to instill in you a true love for the local church, but I want you to serve in full-time ministry, and not just that, but I've even gifted you and prepared you for that your whole life, each step of the way, preparing you to um, have the gifts and the experiences needed to serve in full-time ministry. So it was early on. It was 16, and honestly, didn't really lose that since then. It played into my decision to come to Grace and to come to Grace Seminary, and that's something I feel really thankful for, that the Lord made clear to me from a young age.
You mentioned Operation Barnabas, and then it was Momentum Travel Teams more recently. Probably your leaders were influential people, if you want to name them, but also in addition to your parents and maybe OB leaders, who were some other influential figures in shaping you for ministry?
Sure, yeah, I've had so many, especially feeling called particularly to full-time local church ministry from an early age. I think when you're able to kind of identify that from an early age, you have uh, thankfully people come into your life, men and other pastors come into your life. Once they hear that, and I mean that in a positive sense. So I've been able to serve. Before I was in full-time ministry, serve as a volunteer. So all the different youth pastors and individuals that made an impact on me in each season. I think about on a different sense away from the youth ministry side, but people like a Dave Plaster who invested in me. And I remember sitting over breakfast with Dr. Plaster, and him just really confirming um, God's calling on my life, and encouraging me really by affirming my desire to be in a local church ministry as a pastor. So I remember him just really affirming me in that, and um, and that was a huge thing for me at the time. And so one of the other men in my life would be my first pastor I served under. His name was Ross Bacon, and he was for about 8 years. I served under him in LaGrange, a suburb of Chicago, And he taught me a lot about pastoring, the heart of a pastor, about what it looks like to be generous with what we have, the heart of generosity, and never being close-handed with what we have, but always having an openness to be giving and loving people well. So I learned a ton from Ross. I often think, even in my current ministry now, I wonder how Ross would handle this. He has since gone and is with the Lord now, but how would Ross handle the situation? He really shaped a lot of my pastoring, and how I pastor now was shaped by Ross and my relationship with him. So I feel really grateful. But now in my current role, I actually have had the privilege of having just a relationship with several former pastors that either attend our church currently or who live locally, and several of them have just really taken the time to invest in me personally, and not just the ministry side of Josh, but the husband side, the father side, and I think that's really, really important. Side of it is not just caring for me as a pastor, but as a person, as a man, a husband, and a father too. So and I've got a really good group of Charis Fellowship lead pastors in the area that we get together regularly and have regular Zoom calls, and those are a group of guys that I really look up to, and respect, and really learn from a lot in our time together. So those are some of the things. But I do feel really grateful for just the important people that God has put in my life. I've learned from each of them in the different season that that I was with them. So I feel very grateful.
That's awesome. That's part of the reason we do this podcast too. We want to learn from one another. So these conversations are edifying to me and Trent. We get to hear from pastors all over our fellowship, and it's cool when you give shout outs to some of them, or the number of people who reference Dave Plaster. It's very neat.
Yes. Yeah, I actually had an interesting relationship with Dr. Plaster, because we didn't really have, besides some classes, we didn't have too much of a relationship when I was at Grace. Our relationship actually started because I was interning at a church in Columbus when he moved into the role at Polaris Grace, into the lead role at Polaris Grace. So it wasn't until that time, and when he was back in full-time local church ministry, that we struck up a relationship and started having regular times together. And so, yeah, I feel really grateful for those moments with Dr. Plaster, for sure.
Josh, I'm listening to you talk, and the question I'm going to ask you is almost a book title, and I've read a few things on this.
Sure.
It's very practical in nature, and you were an associate in the suburbs of Chicago. As an associate pastor, how did you take that step to become a senior pastor in Pennsylvania, and how do you, as an associate pastor, know it's time to go?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot of things that I would say, that this transition from an associate to a lead role has been very transformative for me, um, both professionally and personally. And there's a lot of angles to the story. I could talk about it for a long time, but one of the reasons for me for making the move was just a real love and desire for the Charis Fellowship, and wanting to. I was out of the Charis Fellowship for those 10 years, and I could go into some of the reasons why I think that benefited me in learning about things outside the fellowship, and it has really benefited me in my return to fellowship. But I just really had a heart, to be in the fellowship, to be part of the future of the fellowship. It was really a strong desire of mine to be able to do that. And I can remember Tim. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I remember even sitting over a cup of coffee with you right around Nona Lake. And before I moved, and even just, that was a lot of my struggle, was moving to Chicago, was moving out of the fellowship. And so I always kind of had that desire, and that was a big reason for my move back into the fellowship, back to Pennsylvania, was that. And kind of always laugh with people that, based on my family history, if you were to cut me open, I think I'd bleed Charis Fellowship. So I always laugh about that a little bit with people. But
Yeah, and I do remember that conversation, FYI.
do you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that was an important part of me. I remember, making a plea for you to be, reach out to me, make sure I stay involved, and you were able to do that. So I feel thankful. And so I served, another side of it was, I felt pretty early on that my giftings, I started as youth pastor at the church. I was a high school youth pastor and served in that role for about 5 years, and then moved into an associate role where I worked with kids ministry and our senior adult ministry, and preached some and had a lot of different experiences. But about 8 years into that, the senior pastor that I referenced earlier retired. And when he retired, me and another associate pastor were able to move into an unofficial interim role. And I loved it. I loved getting the chance to lead. I loved getting the chance to preach more regularly, getting the chance to cast vision and care for the needs of the people in a different way. And that kind of prompted the Lord leading in my heart. I heard different people over the course of that season, that I was able to be open with, just share about how the Lord kind of starts loosening those attachments and strings one by one in a place that you love, which I did love. We loved that place and that ministry, and we still love those people. And we were even able to visit this last summer for a little while, and just to be greeted by the people and reminisce about old memories. And so but the Lord does that for you. He did that for me. He slowly began to kind of loosen those ties and just make me wonder, because of the Charis Fellowship piece, because of really just really loving the expanded role during the interim season. And then the other side of it is family, just wanting. We didn't have really much family in Chicago at all, so wanting to be closer to family, that played a role. But I want to speak to three instances specifically, three conversations that I had where the Lord put people in my life that really confirmed my call and my decision to be to to try to be a lead pastor here. And one of them was it was a Sunday in I think February in Chicago, and I was preaching. I jumped in and filled in and preached occasionally every few months, and it was one of those Sunday mornings where I had the chance to preach. And so I shared, and after the Sunday, of course, you do the finished up and people talk to you. And there was a lady in our church, and who came up to me and out of the blue, and she didn't know this, but I had actually prayed before I preached. I prayed that morning as I was kind of spending some time with the Lord, and I'd asked the Lord, I said, Lord, I'm feeling like maybe a ministry move is right for me. And I just need you to confirm that in my heart. And I wasn't asking him, I didn't ask him for a sign. That's not, I wasn't doing that, but I just asked him just to confirm in my heart, that it was the right timing. And, so after I preached that morning, it was that same morning I preached, and I had a lady from our church come up to me and say almost verbatim, I just want you to know that you're going to be a lead pastor someday. And I've since told her that and encouraged her and thanked her for that affirmation. But to me, that was just one moment that sticks out in my mind of like, all right, Lord, like that was a confirmation conversation, that something she noticed in me, and somebody that knew me well, and that was really good. Another one was just a conversation I had with a friend, who's a Charis Fellowship pastor, and he called me, and he knew of my desire to be in the Charis Fellowship, and how I had been away from that fellowship for a little while. and serving in a different church. And he called me right in that season. It was just a month or two after this conversation with this lady in my church, and he just said, "Hey, listen, just wanted to check in with you. Just wanted to tell you that I've been thinking a lot about you, and I just really I want you to we need you back in the fellowship." So that kind of just confirmed in my heart. Just that was just another one of those moments where I thought, "All right, Lord, you're confirming this in my heart and my mind," um, and that kind of started the ball rolling for me in my spirit, even more practically, not just in theory. And then the last conversation was I had a relationship with Ed Short previously. He kind of had mentored me earlier in my days as a youth pastor, and I'd called up and set up a meeting with him, and I said, "Listen, I'm starting to just think, you know me well. I'm starting to think that maybe a move into a lead role is for me. I just looking for confirmation from the Lord." And he said, "Well, I'm actually leading the search for a church, and it's Manheim Grace Church." And so we talked, and he didn't know at the time, but he didn't know about my family history here at the church, or that my parents were close by. They're about 20 minutes from Manheim, where we live now. And so that was just another confirmation to me that not only did he affirm in me, the strengths to be a lead pastor, but also was the one helping the church through that process. So was able to hear from that. So I think it just speaks to um, just wise individuals in your life that can speak into your life and help you process. And also the Lord can use those people to confirm in your heart when a move is right. But it was that's not to say it wasn't painful for us. It was painful and not in the physical sense, but just it was emotional to leave our friends behind that we had grown to love, and really had become more like family. All three of our kids that were born there, and so it was a challenge. It was a challenge for us, but the Lord again just really confirmed through some of those circumstances that this is the right time for us. I kind of have always had a desire to be in a lead role, and so that he confirmed that through some of those experiences and some of those conversations.
Does that give you enough for your book, Trent? How do you know it's time to go?
Right, there's about 6 chapters.
There you go. We've already chapter headings as we're listening. So
Excellent.
there you go.
The half of it.
Well, we'll do another interview for when we start to write the book for you.
There you go.
You keep saying lead pastor in your current role. I also think you might be a solo pastor. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us a day in the life of a solo pastor?
Sure. Yeah. So that's something that I think I probably never would have seen myself in. I'm just highly relational, and really love serving on a team. Now I do have a team here for sure. I have elders and other ministry leaders that I lean on. We have several part-time staff that I'm able to lean on and have relationship with, and but it's different than having a full-time somebody else on staff with you. So it brings challenges for me personally. I've had to figure out how to navigate you know being a solo pastor, and I've had to process through what that looks like, and I've seen it done so well, particularly in men that I respect, men like you, Tim, and others that are in a solo role. And it doesn't. I think sometimes we think of it as a little bit of a scarlet letter to be by yourself and a solo pastor, but it doesn't need to be that way. God can really use you in a great way in a church that's smaller. So I try my best to establish a routine, and that helps me a lot. I try not to be confined to my office. That's one of the things that really helps me, and is an opportunity that I have, is I'm able to get out of the office. I find myself in a coffee shop a lot, interacting with community people, and just having people around me is what helps me. So So that helps me a lot. One of the things I really love, the opportunities, is just the being able to have my hands in a lot of different areas of ministry and not be quite so centralized in my ministry. I get to have my hands in a lot of different areas of pastoral ministry because of the solo role that I have, and I appreciate that a lot. So it's one of the opportunities that I see. So, but it definitely comes with challenges. But for those challenges, there's opportunities and great things about it as well.
Yeah, I could echo. I love the flexibility. I love the opportunity to do lots of things. I also find that I can easily get distracted with things I shouldn't be wasting my time on. So rhythms are important. And you mentioned that earlier too, like coming into the fall, I get my rhythms back. We want to actually close out with some questions about your rhythms with Jesus. And just as we close out our conversations, a couple things is you spending time with Jesus. How does he speak to your insecurities? How does he speak to your uncertainty as a husband, as a father, as a leader? So can you tell us about that?
Sure, yeah. I think he speaks through other people in my life, affirming my calling and my gifting. This my process of going from associate role into a lead role has been truly been a learning experience for me, and one in which I'm still growing and learning from, and the Lord, you know, uh, speaks to me during my time with Him. I'm a morning person, so early in the mornings, I have a quiet moment with the Lord before the chaos of the day hits, and I'll sit with my Bible or my iPad and a cup of coffee, just be with Him. I still remember one of the when I first moved, I was able to have coffee with a local retired pastor, and so he was just checking in on me, seeing how I was doing, and I remember asking him and saying, how do you do it? Like, as a solo, he was a solo pastor for his ministry, and how do you get to all the things? How do you do it? And he just really, really challenged me, that it was equally, if not more important, for me to be with Jesus versus doing for Jesus. And so I think about that on a regular basis, just how important it is for me to cultivate my own relationship with Christ, and to remember that my soul, caring for myself and my own walk with Jesus is oftentimes and even more important than the list that I have in front of me. And when I'm able to do that, it helps me to have greater focus and intentionality with the things I do have to do as a pastor. But I've taken that with me in the early years here at Manheim. In Manheim, just the concept of being with God versus doing for God, and that's helped me a great deal.
Josh, in one of your recent series called Promises, uh, which was the promise from God that spoke most directly to you?
Yeah, I was looking back at that series. I think the one that I appreciate the most, and is the promise of His presence.
Mm.
And we worship a promise making and promise keeping God, and one of the promises that He gave to Joshua, when he was stepping into a lead role, so to speak, taking over for Moses, in in the in the Old Testament. He affirmed His presence to Joshua, and so that's a real encouragement to my heart, that the Lord's always with me. He encouraged Joshua, be strong and courageous. It's a familiar verse to us, but you know don't be afraid, do not be discouraged, because Lord your God, He's going to be with you wherever you go. And I think that's probably the one that I hold on to the closest, to just be reminded that the Lord is with me. That this is not Josh Placeway's church. This is the Lord's church, and I just get to be a piece to that puzzle for a season. So that helps me. It affirms me, and it puts me at ease, when I think about the pressures that I face as a solo pastor. Knowing that the Lord is with me really brings me help and peace.
I'd love to close out with that, Josh. There's been some themes that I've heard in this conversation that I'd just like repeat. This idea of service came up so much. We're a serving family. I watched my parents serve. I want to serve. I love that theme. I think that's a calling of a pastor, a ministry leader. So I hear that in you. And we serve the suffering servant. We walk in his footsteps, and he says, I am with you always to the very end of the age. So even as you're serving for him, you're actually serving with him. And
Yes.
I just want to close out with that, just that blessing on you. Keep serving with Jesus.
Great. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Josh, this has been an incredible time. Loved just getting to know you a little bit more, hearing your personal story with your wife and children and ministry and philosophy. Josh, thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate it so much. I've enjoyed listening to the podcast, and I'm a big fan.
Good. It gives you something to do while you're washing dishes, serving in your home, right?
Hey, this is Dr. Trent Lambert from the Center for Thriving Leaders at Grace Theological Seminary, along with Pastor Tim Sprinkle from Leesburg Grace Church. Thanks for listening to our conversation with Josh Placeway.
The More of Us podcast recognizes that we are not alone. We lead best when we walk with others and remember that Jesus walks with us. So join us for more of these talks by subscribing today. God bless you.